Kentucky's medical cannabis industry has reached one of its most important milestones since legalization. And while most of the headlines are focusing on the end of the governor's executive order allowing patients to purchase medical cannabis in neighboring states, I believe that's actually the smaller story. The much bigger development is that Kentucky now believes its own medical cannabis infrastructure is mature enough to begin serving patients without relying on operators outside the state. To understand why this matters, it's helpful to look at how Kentucky arrived at this point. Back in 2022, Governor Beshear issued an executive order that provided conditional pardons for qualified patients who legally purchased medical cannabis in another state and brought it back into Kentucky. At that time, Kentucky had no licensed cultivators, no processors, no dispensaries, and no regulated supply chain. The executive order was never intended to create a permanent medical cannabis program. Instead, it served as a temporary bridge while lawmakers and regulators built the framework for a fully licensed market. Well, that framework became a reality with Senate Bill 47. Since then, the state has spent well over a year creating regulations, accepting applications, awarding licenses, and allowing operators to build cultivation facilities, processing centers, laboratories, and dispensaries. Now that those businesses are beginning operations, Governor Beshear has announced that the executive order will end because patients will have access to products produced and sold by Kentucky-owned licensed operators. I'm Daniel Sabet, CFO at Green Growth CPAs, and over the past several years, I've worked with cannabis businesses in multiple states as they've transitioned from newly licensed startups into mature operating companies. One pattern shows up every single time a new market opens. The biggest challenge isn't obtaining a license. The biggest challenge is building a business that can remain profitable after the excitement of a new market begins to wear off. Well, Kentucky is now entering that stage. The expiration of the executive order represents much more than a change in patient purchasing rules. It marks the point where patient spending begins flowing back into Kentucky's own cannabis economy instead of crossing state lines into Ohio, Illinois, Missouri, or even Virginia. Every dollar spent by Kentucky patients now has the potential to support Kentucky cultivators, processors, dispensaries, testing laboratories, employees, and local communities. That creates tremendous opportunity, but it also introduces an entirely new set of challenges. During the first several months of a medical cannabis program, demand is usually much greater than supply. Patients are eager to purchase products legally, operators are focused on opening their facilities, and there are relatively few competitors in the marketplace. Many businesses experience strong early sales simply because there are limited alternatives available. Eventually, that begins to change. More cultivation facilities come online, more dispensaries open their doors, product selection expands, patients have much more choices, and competition shifts away from simply having a license toward operating the business more efficiently than everyone else. I've watched this transition occur in states like Michigan, Missouri, New Jersey, and several other markets. The operators who consistently outperform their competitors are rarely the ones with the largest cultivation facility or the most expensive retail build-out. Instead, they're businesses that understand their financial statements, actively manage inventory, monitor cash flow, and make decisions using data rather than assumptions. Kentucky operators have an advantage that many earlier markets didn't have. They can study what worked and what didn't in more mature states and avoid making the same costly mistakes. Now consider two dispensaries that open in neighboring Kentucky counties this year. Both receive licenses around the same time, both invest similar amounts of capital, hire experienced employees, and begin serving patients within weeks of each other. From the outside, the businesses appear nearly identical. After 12 months, however, one dispensary has built a loyal patient base, maintains healthy cash reserves, and is preparing to expand. The other is struggling with cash flow, carrying too much inventory, and relying on short-term financing to meet operating expenses. The difference usually isn't location. It usually isn't pricing. More often than not, the difference comes down to financial discipline. The successful operator understands exactly which products turn over quickly and which products remain on the shelf for months. Purchasing decisions are based on sales reports instead of intuition, allowing the business to keep working capital invested in products patients are actually buying. Financial statements are reviewed every month, inventory is reconciled consistently, and cash flow is projected well in advance, so management can anticipate future needs instead of reacting to problems after they occur. The second operator may still generate respectable revenue, But without those same financial systems, working capital gradually becomes tied up in slow-moving inventory, purchasing decisions become increasingly reactive, and profitability begins to suffer even though patient demand remains relatively strong. This pattern isn't unique to Kentucky. It's one of the most common stories I've seen throughout the cannabis industry. A license gives you the opportunity to compete. Strong financial management determines whether you actually succeed. As Kentucky's medical cannabis industry continues to develop, I believe operators should focus on building businesses that are prepared not only for today's market, but also for the market that will exist 3 to 5 years from now. That starts with implementing strong accounting systems, maintaining accurate inventory records, developing reliable cash flow forecasts, and creating compliance procedures that employees can follow consistently. These aren't simply administrative tasks. They become strategic advantages as competition increases and operating margins become tighter. It's equally important to recognize that medical cannabis patients often become long-term customers when they receive consistent products, reliable education, and excellent service. Building these relationships creates recurring revenue and makes the business less dependent on constantly acquiring new patients. Finally, operators should recognize that receiving a license is only the beginning of the journey. Every mature cannabis market eventually reaches the point where operational excellence becomes more important than market timing. Kentucky is approaching that transition much earlier than many people realize. The governor's decision to end the temporary out-of-state purchasing policy isn't simply about changing where patients buy cannabis. It's a signal that Kentucky believes its regulated medical cannabis industry is ready to stand on its own. That's an exciting milestone for patients, for entrepreneurs, and for the future of the industry throughout the Commonwealth. The operators who use the early period to build disciplined financial systems, maintain strong compliance, and focus on long-term profitability will be in the best position as Kentucky's medical cannabis market continues to mature. Thank you for watching. Stay sharp.